Thank you for joining us. It is February 1st, 2012, and we are about to present an extensive edition of INFOWARS Nightly News this evening for you. It is teleprompter free as well. Gerald Celente, always informative, is going to be joining us with the latest on MF Global and the vaporized $1.2 billion. More talk by MSNBC, CNBC, Associated Press, by Moody's and others of lowering the U.S. credit rating to the banksters further. It is all coming up after the first break this evening. But first off, the FBI uses chainsaw in raid on wrong apartment. And the woman said she was terrified. They cut the door down without even knocking. Her dog began urinating everywhere. She had to grovel, basically. And I've done reports where they go to the wrong house and kill your dog and don't even apologize, including a Labrador because it barks. I've seen them kill things as small as Chihuahuas, all to try to find drugs. I guess that some small cartel shipped in that they didn't get a cut of. I mean, the government brings in almost all the drugs on record. This has been going on. That's why they made drugs illegal, because they lost alcohol and the cops were getting paid off during Prohibition. So right after that, a year after they got rid of alcohol prohibition, they said, we got to have something new. So it's drugs. And they make it illegal to keep the price up so they make money. And every cop I talk to knows this, okay? The low-level cops, of course, aren't on the take. The detectives and people in most areas are. I mean, I've interviewed Serpico, and I said, how many of the detectives were on the take? He said, all of them but me. And I've seen articles in New York and other cities where they fire over 70% of their detectives. Now they don't. It's just one big happy family. And now they're coming to your house with a chainsaw. At least they didn't kill her. All the time you read about feds, local cops shooting a retired insurance executive because the door's getting kicked down. He gets up with a gun, they kill him, or a remote control in the hand. It's just totally insane. So there is that report continuing here. 19 crazy things that school children are being arrested for in America. Powerful article from the American Dream up at INFOWARS.com. And not only is playing tag sexual assault, running is a felony. And I don't know how they charge them, but they do it because it's, I guess, a juvenile kangaroo court. And so that's the end of it. You can go read with links in mainstream news with a straight face says, hey, it's good. You know, break a 16-year-old girl's arm because she dropped a crumb on the floor. That's in there. You know, taser people to make them answer questions in the groin. You know, jail time for butter knives. I mean, this is the freedom, total prisoner activity, because tyranny is defined by criminal government. And criminals want an excuse to rob you and torture you and kill you because it's what they like to do. And it's going to get a lot worse. Not all jurisdictions are like this, but more and more that's the standard. Remember, land of the free, home of the brave, it's all about torture. And I'm glad we've got this article tonight because there's a lot of news I end up not covering on the radio. This was one of our top stories. I didn't get to it. A U.S. Intel director prepares public for false flag event. And this is a big report put out by the Brookings Institute, which is like a big CFR think tank. And they've got, you know, some of the top directors of intelligence in here, all quoted by name. You can go read it, saying, quote, it would be far more preferable if the United States could cite an Iranian provocation as justification for the airstrikes before launching them. Clearly, the more outrageous, the more deadly, the more unprovoked the Iranian action, the better for the United States would be. And then they go in to talk about attacking them more internally to get them to do something. And actually, go read this. This is put out by them. Like Gary Hart 5 years ago sent Ahmadinejad a letter saying, we'll stage terror attacks on you, and published it in the Huffington Post. He says, we stage Gulf of Tonkin, we stage other stuff. Yeah, 9/11. We staged the, you know, the incident with the Maine. We'll do it again, punk. And they just gave Al-Qaeda Libya. They're trying to give them Syria. And then lecturing me that some pedophile is going to stick his hands down my pants at the airport because Al-Qaeda. What? What? Look, I see the fraud. I'm awake. It doesn't work. Unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. It goes on here to say, in the hope that Tehran would retaliate overtly or even semi-overtly, which could then be portrayed as unprovoked act of aggression. And they go on to say, that's in a Brookings Institute, Fortune 500 funded think tank which path to Persia? Like, how do we get to war? Page 84, 85. Considering that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was deliberate fabrication, escalate the Vietnam War, one of many members in Congress are shown to have acknowledged and debated, even at the time, we have links to that, or even more recent Iraq WMD hoax. There is certainly historical precedent to create such provocations when targeted nations refuse to provide them. And they admit they're blowing up bases, assassinating, bombing, killing. They got al-Qaeda attacking them, and then say Iran's with al-Qaeda. That's really rich. With this in mind, and noting a overt, ongoing series of bloody acts of war carried out by the U.S. and Israel inside Iran, along with sanctions and planned blockades, also acts of war, the corporate financier oligarchs have been confounded by what seems to be infinite Iranian patience to endure such provocations. Yeah, it's like the old Westerns where they throw the gun down in front of the kid. They just shot the dad. They throw the gun down in front of the 10-year-old and go, pick it up, I just killed your pop. No, I don't want to, mister. You killed my daddy, but it's not very nice. Pick up the gun. There you go, you little coward. You're not going to do it. And the little kid goes, all right. And the guy goes, ha, ha, ha. Because they want to shut down our freedom here during the war and stage terror attacks and blame it on Iran. You understand? This is why they got NDAA and, you know, the pedophile TSA on the streets and all of it. They're getting you ready to protect you from Iran. It goes on here. This is a great article written by Tony Cartolucci for INFOWARS.com, but I actually highlighted it differently when I covered it on the radio. I'm looking where it actually quotes the Clapper, the head and national security guy in here. I'll just keep reading until I find it. With this, or Control F Clapper, and then just put it on screen. With this in mind, and noting an overt ongoing series, he goes on to say about the infinite Iranian patience to endure such provocations. U.S. foreign policy makers have noted for years now that Iran is actually poses no threat to the U.S. or Israel national security, and their acquiring of nuclear weapons serves more of a deterrence against future military incursions against the Islamic Republic by the West than a means of launching unprovoked attacks against nations that all possess nuclear deterrence of apocalyptic scale, like Israel with 400 nukes at least. While Iran endures an increased torrent of unprovoked attacks, they steadily advance their defensive capabilities to ward off what seems like an inevitable invasion by the West. There it is. Despite this documented evidence, the Director of National Intelligence, James R. Clapper, Jr., made a startling statement recently, citing an already discredited alleged Iranian plot involving an assassination attempt of a Saudi ambassador on U.S. soil, that Iran is now more willing to conduct an attack on the United States in response to a real or perceived U.S. actions that threaten the regime. So they're blowing stuff up inside the country and admitting it, saying they want to stir them up for a response, but then going on the news like the public are a bunch of jellyfish idiots and saying, Iran says they may attack America. And they did have one of their parliament members who's on the Intelligence Committee actually say that. There's a lot of evidence some of the Iranian government is globalist operatives. After all, the West actually put the mullahs in power. And some of the mullahs may want an attack because they're very unpopular, and an attack has been shown to make them popular because their public will rally around them. So all these thugs, all these tyrants basically want this because it props up corrupt governments everywhere. But Iran generally, strategically, wouldn't want to attack the United States so that they would then be attacked massively and probably invaded themselves. They would attack through proxies like Hezbollah and other groups against Israel and against U.S. targets over there. But that is a big article. U.S. Intel Director prepares public for false flag event, and that is certainly one of the most important news stories we've got for you this evening. Please get it out to everyone you know at INFOWARS.com. Continuing, Gingrich ballot fraud. Virginia elections officials confirm criminal investigation. Gingrich is being charged so far with 1,500 alleged cases of ballot petition fraud. Well, folks, I mean, there's election fraud through the machines themselves everywhere. It's old-fashioned retail fraud to engage in fraud with ballots. Now let's get into this other article. Hawaii lawmaker acknowledges defeat on bill to monitor all web users. That's right. They've, and Declan McCullough of CNET News also confirms, this is an article by Steve Watson, plans to resurrect legislation in 2013. To give you an idea how out of control government is with their forced fluoridation, forced vaccination bills at the state level. A Hawaiian politician who proposed legislation requiring internet providers to keep records of every website their customers visit, has finally acknowledged the bill is dead in the water. And they went on to acknowledge it's meant to track everything you do and everywhere you go. Well, what do you think SOAP and all these other bills do? By the way, these companies are already saving all that stuff. They just want to legally be able to use it and overturn privacy. And it basically continues to break down different facets of that, so check that article out. Now, here's another one. Sandia Labs, bullet doesn't miss. The patented design doesn't shoot straight. Instead of a spiral rotation, the bullet twists and turns to guide itself towards a laser-directed point. It's basically got little rudders on it. It can make up to 30 corrections per second while in the air. And they've had stuff like this for a long time, but this is the new super weapons that the cowardly establishment's going to use against us, and you better believe this will be kept out of citizens' hands. Just like New Jersey's trying to ban all handgun bullets, period. And these will be fired out of the ground robots they're deploying all over the world and soon against the American people, not just over half the Air Force now drone operated, where the drones make their own decisions that are autonomous. That way the troops can't say no. Oh, the troops are waking up to the New World Order in droves? Well, just go to robots, drones, and robot bullets. Incredible information. Now, before I get to the quote of the day, and before we go to Gerald Celente, I wanted to get into some financial news. But first, Bill Gates funds technology to destroy your sperm. And this is a natural news article, but it cites BBC News and others. Of course, BBC News receives money from Bill Gates to propagandize, so does ABC News, but then they hide that info. You think you're hearing about how he's holy and wonderful and cares about you and your family, just because these publications are all writing that for no reason, though they're being paid. But now they're moving forward with a system to use ultrasound to sterilize men. And then they can offer them cash payments. Or you want welfare? Great, we've got to sterilize you. Of course, already doing it to the water and the rest of it, so there's that report. Now, before we get to the quote of the day and Gerald Celente, I wanted to set this up here because we're going to get into financial news with him. S&P warns of cuts. Another U.S. downgrade coming. And, my issue is this is the same mega banks that actually created all this fraud, now through their ratings agencies they control, who've certified their fraud in the past, saying that governments are beholden to them when it's governments that actually bailed them out. So just amazing information on that front. Continuing here, again, home ownership rates fall to 66% as downturn nears a bottom. They've been telling us it's the bottom for years now. It's a part of a controlled implosion. House prices hit post-bubble low. Politicians out in California say we got to have more taxes and squeeze more people or we're going to go bankrupt. You're bankrupt because you destroyed your economy for consolidation. Here's another one. AA